I'm delighted today to be able to present this presentation, and of course to share the knowledge and the know-how around an amazing international project, which is the project of the conservation of the Medina of Fez in Morocco. And I will, through this presentation, show, of course, to the other case studies or other Medinas, especially in the MENA region, North Africa and the Middle East, what to do and what not to do. I think we need to learn not only from just best practices, but learn also from mistakes of others and what we should not do in order to plan and, of course, to prospect smart resolutions for the conservation of Medinas all over the North Africa and Middle East. And therefore, I want to share with you my screen and my presentation. And then, of course, I've been involved in that the conservation project of Fez since I was in the first year of as a student of architecture when I was in the School of Architecture in Rabat. That means in 1990. And they spent like almost 10 years of my youth in that project, where I really got some of the very important elements of understanding the core of what is cultural heritage through the Medina of Fez. So the Medina of Fez was a living laboratory for me, and it was so important in terms of what we can learn from a Medina like Fez, as I will explain to you. So what is interesting, as the title may reveal, the conservation, unfortunately, and of course, most of the movements and trends of conservation before that Fez was listed as World Heritage City in 1981, they were all dealing with static heritage, conservation per se, restoration of stone and all the restorations around the materiality of heritage, I mean, to keep the memory through the tangible. But actually what happened in the MENA region that we forgot that we have living Medinas and Cairo, Fez, Damascus, and a lot of other Medinas, like Sana'a, and we're not dealing here with only a kind of tangible memory that needs to be preserved, but we have also a living side of people that are still dwelling in that cultural heritage, and we didn't know what to do with it, because most of the strategies, bureaucracies, they were more very enshrined and imprisoned in the conservationist philosophy, but they did not give much importance to the human factor within the historic sites, especially in the MENA region. So this link between conservation, not at the fragment level, not at the building level, but at the urban level, and its link to sustainable development. And this is the issue. It's not about to preserve, but to preserve a heritage, and of course, making it kind of a catalyst for sustainability, and of course, continuous development and ingenious development that comes out of the community itself that's still using that cultural heritage. And this is why I will just a couple of scholars before me, what they said. I think most of this conservation, like Stefano Bianca, who underlined that most of the conservation trends in the Islamic world or the MENA region, they are like kind of sterile conservation, very static, conservation. And they just freeze still functional buildings and urban districts like museums, artifacts in a very arbitrary stage. And they just forget people, they just forget the users, they forget the occupiers and how they get identified with those sites. We should not understand that our historic cities, they were there for 11 centuries. How can, in less than a century, because of the trend of conservation and conservationism, we're making them static and we give it our back to people who actually lived there for centuries? That's the dilemma. And of course, Janet Abou-Lagoud, who also nailed that point, said, no question that we are not after the preservation of a mosque. here or there. We are not after the isolated construction of new buildings within thin veneer of Islamic cliché. We are certainly not after Disneyland reconstruction for folk museums, and this is the problem. It's a real problem. Reducing living heritage sites with people living in them for just a little cultural purpose, which is very formal, or maybe just for tourism to boost, how foreigners, they may visit some sites, and this is the Disneyland side of it, or the fantasist side of it. Or I name it, of course, just as an anecdote. I always say this is the Alibaba show, but we forget the people. So these approaches are frivolous and denigrate both past contributions and present needs. What are the contemporary needs of the people living in the cultural heritage? This actually needs to be questioned. Because this cultural heritage now is a very important capital for social resilience, for cultural resilience. It's part of us, and we cannot just give it for museums. So the task is very serious. So again, what are the key concepts or the argument here before I indulge or talk about the case study of the Medina of Fez and show you that the Medina of Fez was a real laboratory, and we really challenged. I was young at the time, and I really was with this very limited team. I could mention militants because we were facing a lot of dogmas, a lot of ideologies, a lot of technocracies, lots of bureaucracies, and you need to have a holistic urban conservation. A holistic conservation of the Medina of Fez that would shift its womb, it would shift its soul. Of course, we are with the preservation, conservation, rehabilitation, restoration, mainly for the monuments. But at the same time, how we would rejuvenate, how we would catalyze, synergize the community to still dwell there, while themselves they are very aware of the value of their heritage, and not to create the gap and the clash between the users who are still in need of that heritage, and then for that heritage that we become static just for the show. So therefore, urban conservation, sustainability, and urban planning. And certainly in the 80s, for us, at least in Morocco, we had that big issue. Master planning was only for the modern urbanism, the modern master planning, following the Athens Charter. And no one believed that even the Medinas, they could be planned. So therefore, planning is not the technocratic order-making planning for making big avenues, like Jane Jacob said, or the checkerboard planning, but the Medina itself, and what a Medina itself, it has a genuine order within its, let's say, disorder. We need to argue about what is order and disorder. And by the way, I have a publication. I asked the audience if they want to go back to it, I think, called Urban Planning or Planning Paradigm in the Medina, Order in Randomness. And I am arguing and criticizing the modern urban planning does not mean we would create a cultural experience. It does not mean create that order that we may think is an order. I think there is a mental construct in any urban form. And of course, Islamic cities, towns, and Medinas, they were a vehicle of that. I mean, what was important, I will not detail this point, I will get back to it. Another challenge. Whenever we say heritage, we have either a museum or a monument that get tourists in, and we get fees, and when they run away. But this culture linked to economy, it seems like was like antagonistic. We could not even link them. Economy and culture, the two things, they are opposite. And forget about sustainability. So therefore, we said, no, we need to shift the paradigm in the Medina of Fez. The Medina of Fez is still a very important economic hub in the whole urban agglomeration of the whole city. And we cannot just engrave that Medina that covers 850 acres. At that time, we had more than 160,000 people living within the confines of the Medina. And more than actually 13,000 485 buildings according to the GIS that we established. And by the way, was the first GIS for Medina that was established in the MENA region. So therefore, planning in the conservation context means reactivating the dormant cultural and environmental synergies of living heritage centers and make it part of the future of the city. It's not making it part of the graveyard of the city, but making it part of the future of the city. And it's part of this prosperity, the well-being of people, and there is no shame of people. They can use again that cultural heritage. Sometimes even if we separate this heritage from the people, they come and destroy it. And this is what happened in France and in Europe by the end of 19th century. And this is why they invented the term heritage or patrimoine, because they wanted to conserve it, because people, they did not get identified with it. It's not theirs. And we don't have that. We could, these Medinas, I think like Cairo, like, Fez, Marrakesh, other Damascus and other cities, we don't even question the temporality. I mean, in the Medina of Fez, there are houses, they date back to 12th century, and they are still inhabited by people. Some of the houses, they date back to 14th century, and they are still used by the same family. This is actually incredible, and we should not discard this anchorage, this link between the user and its own space. And they think maybe it does not exist in other archaeological sites like Roman and Greek, where we have everything like static, preserved, and we have a red ribbon, don't touch, don't use flashes. We don't have that, and we need to deal with it. And they think this is the future. Our cultural heritage is resilient, sustainable, endurable. This is a good sign, not a bad sign. And how can we grasp this? So therefore, sustainability and conservation, of course, linked to planning. This is not new. We're not just in Fez, we invented that. I think the early extension of the definition of monument to embrace the rural and urban environment was as early as 1964 with the Venice Charter. And then in 1965, the United States initiated the idea of combining cultural conservation with nature conservation. And of course, for World Heritage Trust, they said we need to preserve the world's superb natural and scenic areas and historic sites for the present and the future of the entire world citizenry. That means the question of heritage is not fragments or just buildings or stone. It's environments, it's landscape, and it's wider. And until 1972, with the International Union for Conservation of Nature, developed similar proposals in 1968, and they were presented in 1972 to the United Nations Conference on Human Environments in Stockholm. I'm not talking about now the UNESCO Convention of 1972. That created a major problem. And now even UNESCO, they are questioning that convention because it was all about fragments, all about isolated buildings, but they never considered to go to living heritage and how to deal with people. Of course, they found a resolution by having intangible heritage. Thanks God, they found intangible heritage. And this is why they are now, selecting some sites as intangible heritage, because they understood, they missed it. It's not just about tangible, there is an intangible part, but we cannot separate them and then list them separate. We need to take cases like Cairo, Fez, as serious case studies where the intangible and the tangible, they cannot be dissociated. So I mentioned of course, the Convention of the Protection of the World Cultural and Natural Heritage on November 16th, 1972, which still needs to be resolved. And I'm asking UNESCO colleagues, or maybe, of course, UNESCO is a complex institution. They need to revisit, this is 1972 Convention. Of course, they've done a lot of good things, but this definition becomes now obsolete. Last part, 1992, in Agenda 21, course, where it presented kind of recognition of sustainability as perpetuating human resources in globalizing and consuming world. What it means perpetuating human resources, that means, of course, Agenda 21 in terms of sustainability, it's not just about, you know, the tangible, the static fragments or buildings or sites or towns, but actually how actually we can link the lieu to the milieu. The lieu is just like the tangible, the materiality, but the milieu is the ecosystem, is the living part, is the organic part, and we cannot, you know, just play with around that. So I would just say there was this problem in the whole region, North Africa and Middle East, since we're dealing with Fez and now with Cairo, and really I congratulate you for what you're doing for Cairo now, and you will never regret it because it's the right time, because after maybe just a decade, you will not retrieve what you lost, like what happened in Fez in 1980, 1975, but where with the decay process was really rapid, and we've seen that the whole Medina will perish, will disappear, and then we took action. We succeeded with full modesty, as I will prove to you. So this region is just an amazing region, almost 60 sites listed as World Heritage. Of course, the number of populated historic urban settlements among these are indeed significant, and this is actually very, very kind of representative of North Africa and Middle East. And now what we can do, I think very important now, that these settlements that are located mainly in poor and developing economies, and how can we get the challenge to regenerate, to get the funding, to sensitize the community members to be part of the change. And I think this is crucial now. So what's now about Fez? Let me just show. I cannot show all the slides about Fez, but this is just like kind of quintessential instance or example on how complex this Medina is. You can see from this aerial photo the urban fabric of the Medina, where, as I mentioned, we're talking around 40,000 buildings, around 9,000 historic houses, no cars inside, but an access that was done during and after the protectorate. But the whole urban fabric was pedestrian or walking. And the mistake we did not do, that we did not destroy that Medina. What happened in Tunisia, what happened in Algeria, what happened in Damascus, what happened in Sana'a. Of course, because of the vehicular pressure, we just went to this Medina and we just destroyed it to create those avenues and ugly, again, monotonous linear facades like in the Athens Charter. We did not do that in Morocco. And the thing was, of course, the French, protectorate helped play the role, because the General Lyoté and, of course, Henri Prost and all they realized, wow, this is a very important fabric, we should not touch it. And then after Medina impact. So why I'm mentioning that? I'm mentioning that because this is the challenge. How can you restore one building within that fabric? And you tell me that you restored the Medina. This is the challenge. You have a whole Medina as a fact, as a package. The alley as important as the building. The house has a memory. The mosque has a memory. You know, the organic pattern of circulation is part of its memory. And this is why I'm inviting you to do as well in Cairo. I mean, you cannot just like do pilot neighborhoods and then we were against pilot neighborhoods in Fez. I was among the team. I was young at that time, but afterwards I became one of the advocators. Please, able we have a holistic urban conservation that would reveal the memory, but it can still be very dynamic. In the modern era now, we are trying to imitate Medina, even in Amsterdam, to create walkable, livable spaces. We have them sustainable, walkable, livable, and then we are destroying them because we want to be like. So therefore, one of the challenges of the Medina was actually how to keep this and make it a lesson internationally. One of the first challenges was actually to demystify the urban documents, because most of the urban documents, master planning, plan d'aménagement, here they named it in French, schéma directeur d'urbanisme de la ville de Fez. Though this actually schéma directeur, this master plan, was done in a very brilliant way. It was kind of orientative kind of schema for how to centralize the Medina within the whole urban extension and agglomeration of the whole Fez, because Fez was extending, and of course the metropolization and everything. And I think it was a very kind of crucial document done by very smart people, not to lose actually the centrality of the Medina, its importance in terms of economic, environmental, cultural, social, and its role in the whole fabric of the city, not to make it kind of miserable, poor, destitute neighborhood. And then we say, oh, poor, this district. It's very easy to do that, but it's hard, and it needs really guts to move and do kind of very daring strategy and say, no, this is part of our memory. People are still living there. What we can do to synergize that site and, of course, upgrade the living standard of people, creating activities, what are new opportunities, and that needs a lot of work. It doesn't need 1 year or 2 years, but it needs a lot of reflection, test and learn on the ground, interact with people, see what they want, etc. And this is what we've done in Fez. And I will explain to you when the World Bank loan came to Fez. Well, the problem, we were just fixing a couple of monuments as showcases for maybe from 1976 till actually 1986. And after we realized that people, they don't adhere to what we do. And they said, excuse us, what are you doing it just like for tourism, just for the show? It's not like for us. So therefore, I think this holistic view of conservation needs to be considered. So let me just give you a couple of instances of that holistic policy. Within that, first, I could say smart document of how to maintain the role of the Medina within the fabric of the whole city. First, it was actually maintaining the centrality of the Medina and the urban agglomeration. The second thing, reduce the high population density, as in Cairo. Now, in fact, it was like around 800 to 1,200 people per hectare, and that was not actually human. So we need to, at the time we were thinking about, we call it in French, dédensification, decreasing the population density, and then we realized it should not be done in a quantitative way. It's not, of course, human to just go and kick people out of the site to reduce the number because you have a carrying capacity of the Medina. You cannot do it in Cairo like that. We try to do it in Fez, it's not fair. And then you lose the link between the people who are there and then the tangible heritage that you just keep it behind, and you try to find fancy coffee, literature coffee, you find this little caravanserai with a little show stuff. It doesn't work like that. You need to give people the smartness of the people to invent and reinvent their space within this historic environment. Of course, conserve the Medina's surrounding green and archaeological landscape. We succeeded in that. I mean, I'm not here showing off, but just like telling you what was done on the ground. Honestly, this is no. And of course, prohibiting the buildings around the walls, preserving the landscape, conserving the tombs, graveyards, and all the the shrines that were in the surrounding of the Medina. All this that done. I can show you even some examples. Of course, equip the Medina with public facilities. In the 1960s, because of the slogan of conservation, don't touch, don't do anything, they killed heritage with that. Thanks God they changed their minds now, conservationists. They did not believe in upgrading and anything. I'm not saying please, I'm not saying destroying heritage, but what is actually the level of importance of heritage to make kind of hierarchy of the importance of heritage, what to conserve like a mummy and what not to conserve like the mummy. Not the whole Cairo can be conserved like a museum. So what are the zones and this is what we've done in the master plan as I would come to talk to it. So of course the traffic and circulation is a problem. Empower the economic functions of the Medina. The Medina cannot be seen like static without value. There is an economic actually value and we need to dig to get it out. Transfer the polluting mechanized kind of production units. Of course, you have a lot of clandestine, a lot of people, they are hiding within these historic buildings because no one is seeing them, using machines, using engines and stuff, and vibration, a lot of issues like that. Improve the hygienic infrastructure. A problem. The historic sewer was destroyed because the modern one took place and then they left the old one and the whole leakage of water, capillary rise of water in buildings, and it was a major cause of the decay process. And of course, this was very strategic at that time, but I will skip that. So I'm just now not to dwell much in the, the philosophy, the strategy, the policy, but I will get you to some concrete examples. Here, it's an amazing example of the CARAVANSERAI of NEJJARIN. This is next to the Qarawiyyin University, is the core of the Medina. And you could see how it was before and how it was restored. And trust me, thanks to some living master builders, and I am so proud that I worked with those master builders, rahimahullah, who all of them passed away. معلم العربي, معلم الفقيقي, معلم دريس خاتون, and they were encyclopedic. They were memorizing all the crafts of the Medina in wood, bricks, in buildings. And the building that you see here restored, there is zero cement or concrete or steel. This is all local materials, big bricks, wood, etc. So you could see how now, and by the way, this door here, that was kind of very insecure corner with a lot of crushed rubbish, but now look at it. So by upgrading the tangible parts of heritage, you are also providing a new environment to citizens, users, and you're showing them we care. And by the way, this CARAVANSERAI was actually funded thanks to a major kind of movement we've done to sensitize all the original and the natives of the Medina of Fez, who became prime ministers, ministers, bourgeois in the port of Casablanca, to come back to fund. And I think this movement succeeded. And here was like one of the former prime ministers actually who funded this building because his father was a craftsman in the second level of this CARAVANSERAI. So this is just, I cannot say Madrasa al-Masbahiyya, Al-Bu'naniya, and all, series of monuments. And by the way, these are not, by the way, we need to be very careful. These are not pilot projects. This is just to show to the inhabitants of the Medina of Fez that rejuvenating heritage, making it again alive, is possible. Because at that stage, people, they lost hope. They said, this old town is just poor, destitute, graveyard. Nothing can be done. But as soon as you give them hope, you give them examples, instances, and of course these buildings, though they were mega buildings, but within them we created schools of craftsmen, the new generation of young craftsmen learning from the old craftsmen, and then there is a synergy, there is a dynamic movement of restoring, rehabilitating, but at the same time, training a new generation of technicians, craftsmen, etc. And then we were learning from the big monuments, but going to the poor houses, trying to restore them from the techniques we learned from the big monuments. And that kind of balance that we need to be done. We cannot just deal with big monuments and palaces, impossible. I think the challenge, it's easy to restore a palace, but it's very hard to restore a little house with a poor family. Because the palace, everyone wants the palace. Like we had some problems with some, we were doing fundraising. Like some of them say, "Oh, you want to throw my money in the sewers of the Medina," but they don't know that the sewer is the major problem of maybe 90% of the problems came from the water and the drainage that happens in the sewers and therefore underneath the Medina. Most of the foundations of the houses, they get really weak. Like this Caravanserai, for instance, there was like a river underneath. And we needed maybe almost like one year fixing only the bricks in the arches of the covering the river under the structure before we get to the building. So you see, it's a grassroots operation that needs a lot of resilience and a lot of passion to save your cultural heritage in a very systematic way, but with a long-term results, but not veneer and then restoring a couple of walls and say you restore. It's not. So what I'm showing here, this was like the first master rehabilitation plan. I mean, even that term did not exist at the time. And in 1990, 1989, we had only this modern master plan. Le plan d'aménagement. Le plan d'aménagement, that means the urban master plan of the whole city, the orientation, the zoning. You know, you have the same thing there. So zoning, zone villa, zone villa, you know, G+1, G+3, etc., etc. But nothing that says, oh, hello, within this urban agglomeration, you've done your modern thing, urban planning, but you have the Medina where 160,000 people. And then there is only in that modern master plan, you have only one color on that whole Medina with 160,000 people, and it's gray. And then in the legend you say conservation zone. Nothing is mentioned about how this 160,000 people will live and how they will live and how. And therefore we said no, we need to create a master plan for the Medina. Yes, we can do it. And thanks to the first GIS with Bentley at the time, because we had only a microstation for cartography and an Oracle for the database, and it was like an artisanal kind of work we've done actually for assessing all the buildings, and of course, and there are so many layers on the Medina, the land use, actually the ownership, building by building. The ownership, you know, the nature of the building, what kind of users there, rent, is it actually owned or not, etc. And then the level of decay, how advanced that decay, what action we need to undertake, and we've done that building by building. And thanks to the GIS, we really dismantled the Medina through cartography to get to a wonderful smart master plan that is now a key document for the different orientations of what we need to do in terms of circulation, traffic, in terms of the hydraulic system in the Medina, the sewer systems. Thanks to the memory of the craftsmen, we were able to trace them all underneath. And of course, within one typical thing, you may ask me, the modern master plan, it comes from land use, there is nothing, tabula rasa, we do whatever we want. I think this complexity could be dismantled now with all the digital means, because we need actually to know what are the layers of the Medina. First layer that is important for conservationists is actually the degree of importance of history, archaeological value, how historic that site is. You can do that all, and this is what we've done. And therefore, for instance, the central zone, which is the most ancient one, we're talking about 9th century until 14th century, they are all here with the Qarawiyyin mosque and the university, and the first actually kind of among the first universities in the world, and you know that. So therefore, we created kind of new terms. They did not exist even in UNESCO, and we didn't care about international. We wanted to learn from international, and we wanted to learn from international our organizations. But be careful. Every Medina, every site has its own variables that we need to consider when it comes to conservation, but the dynamics of conservation to create value, not the conservation that you just go there with a microscope and start just fixing the stone. You can do it. There is technology now for that. But how can you go beyond that and create layers of flexibility a little bit to inject some new life in order to rejuvenate the whole body? Even the body, human body, even needs to be preserved every day, because every part of the body is sacred, but in certain time, if there is a problem, you need to do a surgery and then to upgrade its functional side. So please don't make it kind of a biblical kind of sacredness, kind of a heritage that cannot be fixed only for the show. You need to get rid of that and then get to that and understand, because you don't have a pre-classical site here. You have a site where people are still living, and you need to deal with it. And the challenge is how to fix it, from the material side, but also how to give people a chance to live in a decent life. You cannot just witness people for almost a century living in misery. You did not intervene to fix the stone, nor did you intervene to fix the problem of people who are in misery. So what is this? Is this conservation? I'm sorry, this is not conservation. This is unjust. So therefore, a strategic choice needs to be made. And a document like this one is crucial, just to prove to every stakeholder the feasibility of actually making life occur again in a Medina. So I don't want to repeat. These are some of the stuff within this master plan. Of course, the cultural value, the archaeological value. What are the layers, the zones? What is important in the whole Medina? You're treating a Medina like the monument that you master. Okay, you master a monument. What is important? Is it the structural system? Is it there? Is it a memory of a social personality? How you do that? Exactly what you do in archaeology. In terms of making a hierarchy of importance, do it for the whole city. Yes, you can. What are the limits of neighborhoods? Because neighborhoods, they are units of planning the whole Medina, and they are the cells, the dynamic cells where life is. And then, of course, what are how to delimit all key historic areas, the hierarchy of urban archaeological and heritage landscape value within the whole thing, identify the buildings and monuments. Yes, of course, we are with what are the most important monuments, what are the most important madrasas, what are the most important fondok, bimaristan, etc. And then, of course, what are the environmental features? Because most of the Medinas, they were in an arid climate, and they created beautiful riyads. We call it riyad. Maybe in the other part of the Middle East, Fina, Wasat al-Dar, etc. So you need to understand how this works, and then of course the ideas on how to bring it back. It will come with the users themselves. Locate all linear and nodal commercial production activities, of course, the aswaq, the bazaars, or Qaisariya, what we call it in Morocco. What are of course, the most important arteries, and how the commercial activity is actually organized? Is it like around the center, around the building, or around linear alley, etc., or thoroughfare? So this all actually was very detailed. I'm just giving you some examples here. I don't want to get very into it. So the most important thing actually, how to link what you will do in terms of actions. And therefore, just for information, at the urban level, we created 4 kind of important interventions in terms of, like, not the modern zoning, no, it is zoning according to the cultural, historic, archaeological value. And this is why the core, we had that action of urban restoration. Why urban restoration? We thought that what around the Qarawiyyin and Shrine of Idris as a core, which is very important, dating back to 19th century to 14th, is everything there is very important. is an urban restoration. Yeah, you may be shocked. Restoration, oh no, sir, restoration should be used only for buildings. We restore only one monument. No, no. We can restore a neighborhood. The restoration of neighborhood is more important than restoring one stupid building. Why? Because the Medina works as a memory. When we were kids and you are in the same culture, you know that the alley, Zduqa, Sikik, we have the same name. There are memories of people who brought back in those like semi-public, semi-private spaces. They were part of our this. How can we just discard them because of the modernistic kind of conservationists who are restoration at the monuments? And of course, this restoration came now with the green internationally. We should restore even landscapes. Forget now about the destruction of the natural resources and how we say preservation zone, and we're talking about the forest. You see, so archaeologists, they were wrong of fixing restoration to one building or one fragment. A restoration does not mean mummifying, even this verb does not exist. That doesn't mean mummifying a building. Restoration means you restore something to its original state in a museum-like quality intervention in order to inject life, but not to create another mummy. So this is actually the difference of making different mindsets, because our heritage in our region is still a living one. It's not like in other places where heritage was separated and of course left alone, and then we went far away and we built a new life and then we keep it empty, vacant. Such a thing cannot happen in our region. People, they are very linked to their heritage, and they would mention only one beautiful example. We have no clash with our heritage. Never happened. So that lack of clash with our heritage makes it still used and explored. And therefore, I just like try to demystify this term sustainability. Urban restoration, you can restore, of course, this, as I said, the central zone is urban restoration. When you say urban rehabilitation, that means less important than urban restoration. But within the zone of urban rehabilitation, we can actually put some urban facilities. You cannot inject like schools, hospitals in the urban restoration because it's strict, a little bit strict. But doesn't mean you don't have some punctual interventions. You can do them, but not in the large scale as in the second zone. And then the third zone was urban renewal. And when you get to the zone of urban renewal, yes, it's 18th, 19th century kind of heritage, but not valuable as in the center. Then we get to, of course, the parts of that we need to demolish, you know, the tentacles, the clandestine kind of housing, ugly ones. They were just like mushrooming around that Medina, that old town, and they are just really ugly. And you need to deal with them because they are just there because just parasites. Of course, there was a raison d'etre because like they were there because of informalities and stuff. But this is of course another decision that needs to be taken. And it's daring, you know, action that should be done at the level of the government and state stuff. Because if you want to create something again from the decay process and what actually happened, you need to take those strategic decisions. So here's some examples. What, as I mentioned, we started by really investing into crafts. By the way, not crafts for the tourists, not crafts for the Alibaba lamps. Crafts for, because craft, they are still in Morocco used. Every single household, they have still a lot of crafts products, etc. And I think we're very lucky to have these people who are still believing in their craft, and we are also very lucky of consumers and users who are still seeing it like valuable. And now those crafts, they are sold internationally. And you know that the Moroccan products, you can even go to Las Vegas, you can go even to California, and you find them there. I think there is an international market, and that artisanal and craft, they are more important if they are still used by their people than just mimicking some fragments for the tourists, you know, in the Alibaba way. So therefore, this is just some examples of the how we really collected, you know, empirical data on the Medina. I don't want to get to the different layers of the GIS at that time, and you could see that it was still at the beginning with Bentley, the small micro station, and of course, what are the threatened houses to collapse, and the buildings, what are the ruins where they are. And I'm sure we've done an amazing job as well. I am very confident with our colleagues in Egypt. I think you are very qualified professionals, and should say that. So it's so important now to bring that. These are some examples. There is no shame to show how this Medina was. This is called 35 households house. A traditional house that was fragmented to 35 kind of units. One room will become a house, etc. And of course, this needs a lot of work. Years of upgrading. Communicating, mediating with people, the households, the owners, etc. So now we come to the World Bank project. And I think also this is a very essential part of the project in Cairo, how we raise money. And of course, the World Bank is not actually, is not a donation, as you know, it's a loan. But actually was a quite unique kind of project that was designed, conceived with the World Bank people, thanks to the former president of the World Bank, James Wilkinson. I think we are so indebted to that person because he believed in cultural heritage. And why we got that interest, because we organized in 1993 in Fez the first international congress for fundraising for cultural heritage. And therefore, most important, powerful institutions, they came to see what they can do for cultural heritage. And the World Bank was a part of them. And James Wilkinson was very sensitized around that. And then he said, wow, that's it's quite challenging how World Bank became to the conservation of cultural heritage. But again, what was the problem? We had a major problem in negotiating with the first expert of the World Bank, because they were only oriented infrastructure and poverty alleviation. They did not get what it means cultural belonging, what means identity, sense of belonging, sense of place. And thanks to that class, James Wilkinson created the first cell within his top management, saying, very, very careful, World Bank, they need to include culture as a component. When it comes to financing projects, I mean, we cannot just taint or give the poverty slogan everywhere, and then we forget the cultures of people. We are poor, but we have a rooted culture. It makes a difference. Doesn't mean poor, destitute, has no roots. I'm sorry, we have a cultural identity, and it comes with it a lot of other discourses. I don't want to get to what Chernia, a Latin American scholar who did a wonderful job on this question of the value of cultural heritage, and of course was done for the World Bank. And this is why two experts from Harvard that they came to join us. I think one that is originally from Egypt, Mona Sirajdeen. I really congratulate her from here with François Vigier and the first team of thinking with the World Bank about a new way of financing this complex cultural project. And they think we won big time, because from a project that was rejected by economists, because economists, they have their own equations. They don't care what it means, value of cultural heritage. They just get about profit and return. But we proved to them wrong that yes, if there is a loan for the Medina can have amazing return, Of course, at the first time, the return was a bit little, not could not be very defined because from Medina, but afterwards the impact of that loan was incredible on synergizing, bringing life to the Medina. So among the components of that project that we agreed on the different packages with the World Bank, and by the way, that was the first pack for the World Bank to finance Medina or the conservation of Medina. It's actually so daring. Improvement to the existing circulation network, the creation of an emergency vehicular network, because we had a lot of problems of incidents, people, they cannot get out, ambulances, they cannot get inside, catastrophes when it comes to fire. Selected environmental improvements, because we need to upgrade the environmental side of the Medina to give like secure environment, and then of course not in terms of gentrification or just boosting the real estate value of the rich, but it's okay. The expansion of existing programs to improve the built environment, and what it means here actually. It's very important because the decay, the process of decay in the Medina, you have a lot of buildings, they are threatened to be collapsed all the time. So that process needs to be stopped with consolidation, with interventions to stop the process of decay of dilapidated structures. And this actually was very important to be done to stop that process of collapsing of buildings. The creation of incentive program to encourage private investments. I think the same with CARAV. Don't say that people, they are poor. People, when you come and tell them, do you want to fix your house? We will give you an incentive. Let's actually, 40% would be covered by this loan, and then 60% from you. You know what? They say yes. If you say, and then of course, before they say, we don't have any to do that. We don't have any sense to do that. But you get to make the dialogue. What you gain if we give you an incentive and then we intervene, and of course we can actually rehabilitate your house. They agree. And then of course the creation of thematic tourist circulation routes is very important. Before we have only a bus of tourists, they get from Bujloud to Racif, one alley, and then run away. What they see, 2 monuments, and they see 10 bazaars. There is no experience of the tourists. And the tourists, they don't spend enough nights to spend more money. But in the same time, there is carrying capacity of these big buses. They come and they just like get the streets overcrowded. So therefore, we created 4 or 5 more circuits, thematic, itineraries. One was about historic walls and archaeological sites. The second was about Andalusian palaces and gardens. The other one was about artisan and crafts alleys, and one was about the caravanserais. And they think this diversity of the portfolio of the themes that your Medina can give us can be very important to generate money, but without flooding streets with tourists. Poverty alleviation, I think, with employment opportunities, and thanks to that loan, a lot of métiers, they were actually generated around the restoration, the rehabilitation of buildings, of course. And the more you upgrade your Medina, the more you make it visible, the more you have a lot of employment opportunities. They come there. And of course, the foreign investments, they trust you more when they see concrete kind of change in the quality of the Medina. And this is what happened to Fez. And we've seen a large number of foreigners, even they want to come and stay forever in the Medina. And there are some foreigners from England, France, and Germany. They bought their houses and they're there for more now. I know one person there for more than 25 years, and he's so happy inside. So there is no issue of that kind of disorder, chaos. The Medina is a maze, no Alibaba. So please, we need to change the mindset internationally. I'm not saying to bring all foreigners to buy all our heritage sites, but no, at a minimum, just to actually to show that the Medina can be adapted to different uses, to different cultures, different ethnicities, and also it's inclusive, that the Medina is not just a kind of, confined and closed space. And of course, the most important thing by the loan of the World Bank was also to reinforce the local capacity to handle the loan and to handle the project. So one of the, if I may get to that, so this is just kind of micro enterprises for restoration made by young students from an institute that I was part of it, one of its founders. The Institute of Dar al-Mukri, Institute of Arts and Crafts, was a brilliant institute indeed. And then, of course, environmental development, upgrading the physical social conditions of the Medina, the natural environment. I mean, how we deal with water, energy, light, health, and hygiene in a very holistic way. These are some of the examples just to show you that the work is not for the show, for a couple of people to come and inaugurate and cut the ribbon and applaud, and we've done it. No, you could see that this stuff that cannot be inaugurated, the sewer and how the before state in the below and then the after state, you could see it. And this is the GIS, of course, where every single thing, like here you have the fountains, the dots, and then the springs. The springs are the very natural springs, the potable water, and then of course the black, they are the natural rivers under the Medina. The red is the water that comes to be distributed to houses from the natural rivers. And then, of course, and the red squares, they are the sewer framework. So there was a whole management of the hydraulic system of the Medina, how not to mix the sewer with the potable, how about, managing the resources of all springs of the Medina, and versus the modern system of bringing potable water inside. So lots of work was done on that side. Removal of polluting and toxic industrial activities. I think the Medina was really in a terrible state because of the tanneries, and the tanneries, they were using chromium as a poison. Of course, it was a major problem. We had a lot of pollution there. So we took all the mechanized activities to a new district, which was done far away from the Medina. Of course, but not, of course, the authentic activities, only the ones mechanized with machines and stuff. Okay, here are some of the examples of landscaping, gardens, and of course how preserving botanica, and of course the whole Medina. And this was a very good way to revive also the authentic plants around the 11th century, 12th centuries. Cleaning ruins and abandoned buildings in the fabric. There was like, kind of places where you had insecurity, you have lots of things happening, immoral. So therefore, that was given visibility. Excuse me. So organization of traffic related to environmental development. This also very important. Not destroying buildings and just getting those avenues. No, it was done in a very subtle way. I mean, which corners we can carve because the building is not very important, and how we can go it around to create different kind of a hierarchy of importance of accessibility. Is it emergency? Is it commercial? Is it kind of providing or provision network, etc. Some of the landscape, as I've mentioned before, improvement of urban environment. You could see here in that valley, this is the northern kind of castle, which is now the Museum of Arms. It's just beautiful museum, and you could see that with all the informal houses and slums, they were cleaned from that area. And you could see here on the right the improvement of the street environment. Street environment is very important. You see, when you look at this one on the top, you see it's a place where you feel insecure. But the bottom one, you bring life. And what you've done, the minimum, not a big deal. You just come and, try to treat the walls and make them, a little bit clean. And then you clean the whole mindset around those streets, from one that is dark to one that is actually secure. So now, in terms of cultural development, a lot of things happened. A series of new museums, annual festivals, and you've heard about the Sacred Music Festival Fez, very successful one, culinary art, things, creation of the first Andalusian music school in a 17th century house, Darabil. There was actually the arts and craft exhibitions, folklore performances, but not in the Alibaba way, in terms of, as I mentioned, I'm sorry to use this term again and again. This is not just like to bring your people tents for the tourists, but actually done in a very smart way to respect people, but at the same time to be proud to present your culture in a plaza, like the plaza that was done next to Bujoud, in one of the gates in the north of the Medina. Tourist circulation routes, as I've mentioned before, the different thematic and presenting your heritage in a more holistic way. Literary coffee shops, and of course with guest houses, and now they are very important. A lot of guest houses that were done. At the first time, they were a bit like random, but we created a whole legal framework for that. So I don't want to dwell much on that. So what can I say? My conclusion from the Medina of Fez, I think when there is a vision and there is actually determination and perseverance from the top and the bottom, we can do things in a proper way, in a holistic way. The most important thing is not just to fix one building for the show, but actually to take things from the very complexity side in order to dismantle that complexity around poverty, social issues, environmental issues, economic issues. And when there is a holistic vision with actually an institutional framework, with a clear legal framework, not the legal that comes to punish again, no, the legal that actually just puts guidelines to innovate about what should be done. And then, of course, mobilizing all stakeholders and be very inclusive in that operation. A holistic urban conservation can be done, and it's real, but it needs a lot in terms of changing mindsets first. Not to get unilateral because one archaeology is dictating one sacred rule, or one architect or designer saying that I want to do fancy fantasies building, or an economics who is crazy about his equations, or etc. etc. But I think it's kind of a team building, an exchange, in a collective intelligence to make life happen again in those beautiful historic sites and towns. Fez is one instance, and I hope that other towns can be rejuvenated again like Fez and Cairo. I am very confident you have all the competencies and the human resources to do that. And we feel very sad to what happened to cities and towns in Iraq, that we cannot see them again anymore. And I wish all the best and luck for my colleagues in Egypt. I cannot name them one by one. Some of them from whom I learned a lot. Some of them I worked with. Some of them I studied with. And I really, my salam and my kind regards to all of you around. Thank you so much for listening to me. And I'm sorry to be a bit long and sometimes too enthusiastic. I was not too enthusiastic because I want to share some insights, because you are belonging to the same culture and I want to, see that your project would be successful as well. Thank you.